Breaking news, friends. It's September 19th, and this is sensational. The ground is shaking under Gerasimov. He's facing dismissal. Putin is dismantling his inner circle. Large-scale purges have begun. Kozak has already submitted his resignation. This is an unprecedented move. Gerasimov keeps lying to Putin about advances at the front, but the truth is very different. The front is cracking. The Kremlin is in a panic, while Ukraine is preparing for a decisive response. About the unprecedented purges within Putin's military and political leadership and the possibility of a coup d'etat. A new insider report from the well-known journalist Alesya Batsman, right now.
Gerasimov will simply leave Putin's office in handcuffs. They'll take him straight to Lefortovo. So he walks into the office, a free man with his report. And if he tells the truth, because he's already losing his temper, he'll snap and they'll take him away in shackles. You understand? He's already started. These stories are happening in full force now. He's purging his inner circle. And this is just the beginning. And we're going to see more of what we're already seeing. Someone jumps out a window. Something happens to someone else. Someone supposedly shoots themselves. Someone just gets fired. A lot of people have already been imprisoned. They're actually in prison. Real investigations are underway. And their property stolen from the state is being confiscated. But by the way, they weren't just stealing for themselves. They were stealing to pass it up the chain. Look, he hasn't yet gotten to the point where he's targeting his own, the key people close to him, the ones I mentioned. That is, he doesn't touch Shoigu, even though he's as corrupt as they come. He doesn't touch, say, Patrushev either. He just rotates them around. He doesn't go after Medvedev, even though Medvedev stole several billion from him. That's according to investigators' reports that have been published. Yeah, he seems like some drunk, a fool, but look, he knows what he's doing. Is that even normal? But look, this hasn't reached there yet. But logically, given how things are developing, history repeats itself. There's no escaping that. The next step will be that all these key players, his inner circle, the ones I mentioned to you, will need to get ready for prison. You see what I mean? As for Gerasimov, he's been under fire for a long time, and now he just doesn't know what to do. It's like, something explodes here, something's burning there, something else is on fire. How is he supposed to patch all of this up? Because Putin has been dissatisfied with them for a long time already. Putin has been actively purging his inner circle. Look, do you see what's happening? Like in any truly totalitarian society, any powerful and oppressive tyrant, in order to effectively maintain his absolute influence, considerable power, and unquestionable authority, periodically needs to decisively get rid of his immediate inner circle and thoroughly refresh it with new, loyal individuals. These are the laws of nature and of such wild jungles. The same thing happened under Stalin. Stalin, who is loved by Putin and, by the way, by Russians too. Nothing new. By the way, this started even under Lenin. And if we look at the history of any prominent tyrant, we'll find the same patterns there too. What does this mean? Look, Putin has people close to him, those he relies on in his actions. And then there are people who carry out his orders. In the economic sphere, in the military, in the information sphere, and so on. He has been working with them for a long time. He knows them and they know him. And naturally, they are all tied together, essentially by his criminal orders, their own criminal actions, and by the criminal outcomes that all of this has led to. But look, there's this concept called metal fatigue. That is, when you've worked with someone for a long time, when you've seen a person not just as, well, for some he's a tyrant on a throne, someone it's hard to approach, a celestial being, someone people are afraid of, even afraid of just his glance, and immediately run off without asking unnecessary questions, without bringing bad news, rushing to carry out his orders. But if a person has gone through poverty with you, through the toughest, harshest days, has seen you being humiliated, has seen you humble yourself, has seen how others treat you, how you went through everything, how they helped you, pulled you out of all sorts of troubles. Look, consider this carefully. When these individuals, who were truly your equals, and at times even your clear superiors at certain crucial junctures, choose to steadfastly remain with you throughout your entire prime, that, my friend, is undeniably a profoundly double-edged sword. It's a very dangerous situation because at first, yes, they help you, you're all together, you're a team, but then at some point they start to think, come on, how much longer can this go on? Why should I grovel before him? I mean, do you remember what he used to be like? He was this and that, you know? And now what? He's become some big shot. He's gotten full of himself. These drunken conversations in the kitchen with their wives, with their closest ones, they don't, how to put it? It's human nature. They don't just disappear. That's what everything is built on. It's like this deep-seated kind of resentment, you know? And now but do you remember how I helped him? I pulled him out from where he was, from this and that, and now he just wiped his feet on me or didn't appoint my son. And that's what's happening now. You can see what kind of struggle there is among the children of the so-called Putin elite over whose son or daughter will head a sector in the country and get control over the cash flows. It's an incredible struggle. There's a crazy battle between clans for resources. And of course, it's important for Putin to manage all of this and essentially to give everyone a chance to feed from the trough. That's how the balance is maintained, so to speak. So look, why am I saying all this? Well, just to explain in simple terms, on my fingers, what's really happening in that environment. So as a result, what he ends up with is that part of his inner circle, and not just any part, but the closest one, eventually becomes the kind that, first of all, doesn't always follow orders, and doesn't rush to carry them out quickly and unquestioningly. In other words, they start to argue, they start to discuss, maybe it would be better this way or maybe worse. This could have bad consequences. You're wrong here or you're completely wrong here, Volodya. Listen, but he doesn't want that anymore. He's already started to feel like a czar, a demigod, you know? He doesn't want anyone telling him what to do. He wants to be adored. You see? And by the way, the story with Kozak, you mentioned him. That's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. Because just recently, yes, Western media conducted several investigations on the topic that he was the only one who was against Putin starting a full-scale war. Not because he loves Ukraine, but simply because he believed it would be disastrous for Russia itself, for all of them. In other words, he was thinking about himself. And in principle, he was absolutely right about that. But I knew about this even earlier because, well, according to our sources, it was known that he had this kind of special position. And naturally, Putin really didn't like that. Really. And why should he have to listen to that? Look, he understands that if someone allows themselves to have a separate opinion and contradict him, then the others will look at this person and think, hey, so it's possible you can use this pluralism of opinions. That means the Tsar, the king, is naked, not so strong after all. That means you can argue with him. It means you can disagree and not obey. And what does Putin have? Moreover, all those people who have seen him in different situations and think that it was all just a matter of chance and that really I should have been in his place. Remember that old Soviet movie, If You Drink, You'll Be One? In the end, they are the ones who are theoretically inclined to regime change, that is, to conspiracy. So in their minds, this idea can actually take root and be realized. And he understands this very well too. Because when did Stalin carry out purges? When he felt the pressure tightening around his neck to the point where he could be overthrown at any moment. In other words, there would be a conspiracy and he would be removed. And in fact, during the last round, when he was purging his own people, he was simply killing his comrades. So first he replaced them with younger ones, then a second time, then a third. But on the next round, he simply didn't make it in time. He was planning to carry out another purge, but they got to him first. Then in fact, we all know the result, a puddle of urine and accordingly all the subsequent processes that began after. Well, and the people were told that he died suddenly and tragically. It happens. So look, the situation here is similar. That is, right now Putin understands that he urgently needs to carry out a purge because the situation in the country is difficult. When everything is going well, you know, you can lull everyone, give this to one, that to another, and everyone is satisfied. Basically, there's plenty of everything and things are good and you can share everything with everyone. But when things aren't so good and in some places are really, really bad, problems start and more people become dissatisfied. And in order to effectively suppress this widespread discontent at its very root, to completely rid himself of the significant risks of conspiracies, or simply when his specific orders are not meticulously followed, or are carried out quite differently than intended, he also periodically and systematically conducts extensive purges. Everything that happened before this was very inconspicuous, targeted. It was like small surgical operations. But now, considering that the situation is serious and difficult for him, no matter what anyone says, it's an extremely tough situation, because the economy is a mess and things are going badly at the front, since the original goal was different and an incredible amount of resources is being spent on this objective. So the question is, how much longer can he hold out like this? So Gerasimov will simply leave Putin's office in handcuffs, taken straight to Lefortovo. That is, he walks into the office, a free man with his report. And if he tells the truth, because he's already on edge, he'll snap. And they'll take him away in shackles, you see? And this is an absolutely real scenario. He's just trying to save his own skin. That's why all these Potemkin villages start popping up. What does this mean for us? It's great for us. Because the more, first of all, not just a lack of information, but false information Putin gets, the more he believes he's in a false situation, the more mistakes they'll make, and the more actions they'll take that will benefit us. So all of this considerable mess and the continuous infighting that is currently going on within their ranks is, in fact, actually working quite effectively and advantageously in our strategic favor. You see what I mean? That's everything that's happening. Especially since, listen, in the end, it's also a question of who and how will come out on top there. Because you understand, right? These internal power struggles, and I'm not even talking about Putin himself now, but rather what's happening in his inner circle, all these fights over the money flows. First and foremost, it's all about the money. No one is really fighting for any ideals, for some higher purpose, or for the motherland. No, they're all fighting over the money streams. Who managed to seize which factory from whom, who took over which airport, airfield, business sector, or land. That's all it's about. So all these showdowns when everyone is stressed out, when everyone is basically on edge, and this is what insiders who really know what they're talking about tell me. In fact, even in interviews, many people have said that basically everyone in the Kremlin circle right now, that is, we're talking about the top generals, the top oligarchs first and foremost, and the top heads of agencies and officials, they're all on drugs, every single one of them. Why? Because they can't cope on their own anymore. They work under such intense pressure and are constantly expecting a blow because ever since 2022, when Putin launched the full-scale war, everything has obviously entered a state of turbulence, so they need something to relieve the stress, you see? And then all these wild orgies start, these drug-fueled parties, by the way, with all the consequences that come with them, including when someone is found somewhere afterwards. Oh, listen, I won't even say it. Someone told me about it in an interview, and I don't even want to repeat it. It's all just, well, but still. So that's precisely when all these adverse side effects truly begin, when these individuals try to relieve their stress in this particular way.
Alesya, you've touched on this topic. We've often discussed how even Putin's pro-Russian media try to create this propagandistic image of machismo around him. Machismo, he's always in the photos, the tiger, doing sports, flying. I think he even flew with the cranes, correct me if I'm wrong. And there's a huge number of his supposed love interests. Now, against the backdrop of the full-scale invasion, when there are colossal problems in the economy, yes. When Putin is busy attacking an independent state, terrorizing it, I understand that most likely this was 100% initiated by the Russian security services. New information, supposedly an investigation, subordinates provided Putin with an underage mistress. Her father is still receiving money from the Kremlin to keep quiet. It is reported that she was an applicant to the journalism faculty at Moscow State University. Her name is Alesya Batsman, and in 2010 to 2011 they had a relationship. She appeared in some kind of erotic calendar in that particular style, and so she became his mistress. Now explain to me, even from a technological point of view, why would anyone in society be interested in this? Putin is a terrorist. Putin is waging an aggressive war against Ukraine. Why should we, or the world in general, care about who he has sexual relations with? After all these years, they are reporting this now. This is most likely some kind of, an information psychological operation, in your opinion, or a special operation by the intelligence services. What do you think?
Look, honestly, considering everything that we truly know about Putin's actions and his many deeds, the sheer number of innocent people tragically killed, both Ukrainians and Russians, and, by the way, people from numerous other nations as well, the truly immense number of deaths that are personally and undeniably on his conscience, directly on his hands.
Yes.
Well, you see, there is truly no crime more egregious or profoundly terrible than this particular one because it unequivocally includes the brutal murder of innocent children, which is an absolutely unforgivable act. How many children, infants, unborn babies are dying in Ukraine? Because it is Putin who signs these orders, gives them, and his Russians carry them out, shelling Ukraine. And what did the Russian army do and is still doing when it entered and occupied Ukrainian cities and villages? We all remember this. All of this is because of him. He was the one who gave the orders for this. He wanted it, you understand? And after all of this extensive and widely publicized information, any news about his personal life, such as significant scandals in the notorious style of Epstein, just doesn't make any discernible impression at all whatsoever. I mean, it doesn't affect you at all. It doesn't shock you, not in the slightest, because, well, we already know something else. So, what do we expect from this person? That he's going to be some kind of super righteous man or a model family man or something? No, honestly, we're not even interested in what's going on with him because we're interested in something else. How can we ensure that Ukraine achieves a just peace, that all the criminals end up in the dock, and that we can finally focus on developing and rebuilding Ukraine? That Russia pays us reparations and we can finally put all of this out of our minds. Look, the absolute biggest dream, if you were to truly ask me what the single biggest dream is, what it truly entails, it's that all of us, every single individual, would no longer need to remember Vladimir Putin's name, to even know it, to ever think about it, or to discuss it at all, ever again. And that will happen when he's gone, when he completely disappears from the scene, when this regime collapses. Then we'll stop thinking about it altogether, because we'll have our own challenges, our own plans, our own lives, our own everything. You understand? That's actually the main dream, to simply be rid of all of this. But I understand why we're doing this right now. Every day we're forced to because it's the main threat. It was, is, and remains so. Yes, we're forced to because we need to know our enemy by sight. We need to know what he's doing. We need to know how he thinks, what we should prepare for. Because he's strong. He continues to be strong. No matter what anyone says, listen, we shouldn't lull ourselves or make fools of ourselves by saying, oh, come on, it's nothing. What's with that Putin? It's just something over there. Like it's nothing at all. But that's not true. Listen, that's not true. You shouldn't underestimate the enemy. And in fact, if you were to talk to our dedicated guys on the very front line, those who are actively involved in the day-to-day operations,
yes,
no matter which direction you take, well, because I talk to them all the time. From here, from there, from over there. I ask them what's going on. We call each other and they tell me this and that. You'll realize that they actually understand very well that the enemy should not be underestimated. Yes, they hate those who came to our land with weapons to kill Ukrainians. Yes, of course, we all hate them, but we do not underestimate them. That's important. Because if we objectively look at who we're fighting and what we need to prepare for, then we'll take the right actions, effective ones, you understand? To be able to counter this. So I'll say it again. I don't know why. Who published this? I haven't seen this information yet. I'll check. I don't know who published it or for what purpose. Well, if it's the Russian security services, then probably it's to remind everyone that he's still young and supposedly full of energy. I don't know, right? In a very strange, kind of unpleasant way. If it's some opposition media, well, maybe they just dug up this story, got it from someone, and, flashy facts, catchy headlines, that sort of thing. Well, why not? Why not get some traffic? So I can't really tell you what that was about because I'm not familiar with the details. But for us, it doesn't change anything at all.
Friends, a very important point. Next week, Trump made a statement during his visit to the UK that sanctions are possible. Of course, Alesya and I have heard this constantly, but everyone is talking about Melania Trump, who showed up in a huge hat, and the hat was covering Melania. That was trolling. But I think the hat wasn't the main thing. Without a doubt, the outfits of King Charles's wife and Melania Trump, as they say, were our flag. And this means that possibly there will be good news for Ukraine next week because King Charles told Trump that Ukraine needs to be supported. I hope that Trump will listen and that next week Alesya and I will... So the idea is that Trump might listen to King Charles because he is very vain. And as a result, he might do something decent towards Ukraine. Alice, for the final question, do you think we should expect Trump to listen to Charles?
Well, you and I are already supporting this flash mob, see? Without even agreeing on it. Yes. You're also almost in blue and yellow because your blouse has a bit of that sheen, right? My yellow is clearly visible in blue, and fundamentally, just by the very way we present ourselves and appear, we are unequivocally stating, dear friends, that of course the crucial moment has arrived. It is finally the opportune time to awaken from our slumber and decisively impose comprehensive sanctions and proceed with a definitive vote on the proposed bill without further delay. Yes, 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 it's a beautiful photo. To vote on Lindsey Graham's bill, both the first and the second. That is, both regarding sanctions and recognizing Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. Although, yesterday we recorded an interview with Chevcharkin and he said, well, why call Russia a state sponsor of terrorism? Well, Russia is itself a terrorist state, a terrorist. So we just need to start calling things by their proper names. Well, listen, you have to start somewhere at least. So we support Lindsey Graham. We support his fight both for himself and for us. Look, Dasha, let me tell you one thing briefly. The way I see it, for Trump to take those sharp, unpleasant actions against Russia, against Putin, really cornering him, backing him up against the wall, and thus forcing him to sit down at the negotiating table to sign a peace agreement that would be fair for us. In other words, to really twist his arm so that Trump would actually go through with it, moving from words to action, there needs to be something, not just persuading him like a king or asking him like all the members of the European Union who are constantly flying to him, talking and pleading, but something truly significant, something that, even without sentiment, would appeal to his personality. His personal comfort or his personal future, the future and well-being of his family, I mean, would be at stake, and he would be under real pressure, facing a situation where either he signs off on all actions against Putin, or his own situation would seriously deteriorate. That is, he could lose this, that, and the other. In such a scenario, I'm telling you absolutely, he would have no choice. There would be only one path for him, and that path would lead him, by the way, to sanctions against Putin and to total support for Ukraine and so on and so forth. The question is just when. So the question is about timing. Everyone keeps asking, when will it happen? What exactly needs to push him to finally say, that's it, slam his fist on the table, and do it? I could be wrong, but it seems to me that the only time this could happen in the near future is the elections that will take place in the US in 1926, in November 1926. That means Trump will need victories so that the Republicans can regain the majority, and so he can remain a full-fledged president and not lose power. Because if the Democrats get more seats, then, you see, it will be very difficult for him. Right away, that's a completely different Trump, with completely different powers inside America, a completely different situation for him. Immediately, the question of impeachment arises. Things start to get shaky again. He understands this very well. He absolutely needs to win, no matter what. But what does it mean to win? What is an election campaign, friends? It means the main campaign is so that people don't forget what happened, the victories that have been achieved, and to vote on emotions and the show. These victories are needed right before the elections. So roughly speaking, summer or early fall of 2026. By that date, in those days, of course, it is personally beneficial for Trump, for his political future, to defeat Putin and win a victory for Ukraine. Essentially, yes, to make peace, a just peace, so that it works out. Moreover, if he does this, he could even be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in October. So, you see, that's the jackpot for him because the Ukraine issue is important, it's on the agenda, and Lindsey Graham is completely tied to it, and he's running for office. It's not like Trump, who is somewhat removed. Lindsey Graham will either be in power or out of it. He built his campaign on Ukraine. For him, until November, that means in the summer or early fall, he needs to pass his anti-Russian bills to show his electability. Look, I'm great. I'm so effective, and people will vote for him. They'll elect him. So, you see, I see this as the deadline. Unfortunately, if it happens sooner, and we all want it to happen tomorrow, right now, today, tomorrow, well, listen, that would be wonderful. But we understand that our task is to keep fighting, to stay focused on the path we're on, to keep up our struggle, and everything else. If it helps us, then thank you for that. So we're waiting for it, yes, but at the same time, we're working and preparing to stand strong ourselves and not fall apart before that time.
Alesya, congratulations. You have 300,000 subscribers on your YouTube channel. Where there's 300, there will be 500. And where there's 500, there will be 1,000,000. Thank you so much for finding the time, and I'm very glad to see you.
Well, Dasha, in turn, I want to congratulate you too. You just beat me to it because just yesterday was your birthday. We congratulated you. We wished you happiness. We wished you good health. And we wished that your creativity would bring you as much joy as possible. Better, more, stronger, and that everything you set your mind to would come true. And I want to ask all our viewers, friends, right now in the comments to write your wishes for Dasha. Everything you want to wish her, all the good things, all the awesome things, all the sunny things, please write them and we will definitely read them and Dasha will definitely read them too. I'm ready.
Of course, you're always ready. Our tandem is always ready to discuss the most important things. Friends, thank you so much for loving our tandem. Thank you for your likes and comments. There are two great pieces of news here. The first news is that Ukraine and Poland have agreed to create a joint operational group for unmanned aerial systems. That's the first piece of news for you to digest. And the second is that Ukraine and Poland will jointly produce ballistic missiles. You know, I was just thinking maybe now Poland will also help us shoot down Russian drones. What do you think about this news?
Well, actually, this isn't really breaking news, though I wouldn't go so far as to call it old news either. But still, here's what it's truly about, my dear friends. The crucial point is that Ukraine has been consistently asking to close its airspace ever since the very beginning of Russia's full-scale, brutal invasion. We all vividly remember this. There were indeed long, extensive discussions and numerous consultations about this critical matter. We earnestly asked all our Western partners, both the powerful European Union and the influential United States, but absolutely nothing significant has changed. The primary reason, as they consistently declare, is that they genuinely don't want to anger Russia, because Russia, of course, reacts very negatively and aggressively to this particular action. So up to this very moment, it simply hasn't been done. But look closely, we know precisely how this can effectively work. We've seen clear and undeniable precedents. We saw, for example, when a very large and overwhelming number of rockets were launched at Israel all at once. Just recently, unfortunately, a truly devastating event. I'm not talking about the ongoing, regular, and persistent attacks that Israel has faced since its very founding, but specifically about a critical moment when a massive, unprecedented number of serious, powerful rockets were launched at once, not just the usual smaller shelling that the Iron Dome can typically handle with ease. When there were these truly mass attacks, we vividly remember how the Allies immediately grouped together, swiftly scrambled their advanced aircraft, strategically deployed aircraft carriers, sent up everything, fighters, interceptors, everything imaginable, and all the rockets flying toward Israel didn't even reach Israeli airspace. Everything was meticulously shot down before it got there. Absolutely nothing was left. That's precisely how real, committed allies and genuine partners can effectively help, and indeed, how they absolutely should help in such dire circumstances. By the way, that's basically where it all ended because everyone who wanted to try this with Israel saw that there was no chance. You see, but for some reason, they don't do the same with Putin, because really, what is he threatening with? Let's break it down. What is he actually threatening the whole world with? Only nuclear weapons, nothing else. Well, everything else, all his cards, as Trump likes to say, are completely on the table for everyone to see. We've seen it all. We've personally felt it ourselves. And the only truly remaining thing left is nuclear weapons. That's really the only thing he constantly uses to blackmail, to threaten, and to manipulate others. But I want to tell you that among our significant Western partners, especially in Europe, there are practically no major players left who still genuinely believe in this constant blackmail. Even if you look at the official statements from country leaders, from intelligence agencies, you can see that they all say, no, we don't believe this blackmail. We have to act to protect Ukraine, to protect Europe. So, essentially, among the biggest players, the only ones who still believe that Putin might use nuclear weapons are the United States, as of today. For them, it's still an absolute deterrent factor. As soon as something is discussed, Putin comes out and says, we have nuclear weapons. Or not even Putin, but some of his propagandists, his lackeys say, we'll use nuclear weapons. And the US goes, oh, okay, fine, we won't help Ukraine, we won't defend, we won't. You see, it works almost magically. It still works, even though there's a ton of analysis, and the top nuclear weapons experts seriously doubt the current state of Russia's nuclear arsenal. How much of it has been resold or stolen through corruption, all these things. The question is, what condition is it in, considering that by operational rules, nuclear weapons are supposed to undergo special inspections every year, which costs a huge amount of money. So the question is, have they actually done these inspections, or have they just been pocketing the money all this time? Why? Because in Russia itself, of course, no one believed, and I think still doesn't believe, that it would ever actually be used. Why? Because even in the name itself, what is nuclear weapons? It's a weapon of deterrence. The idea is that if it ever gets used, that's it. World War III, which ends with planet Earth plunging into darkness, meaning humanity could simply disappear as a result. That's why it was invented, but by default it can't be used, you see. So the question here is, what condition is it in? Even if some lunatic decides to use it, will it actually launch? Will it fly? And so on. But, well, in any case, of course, even if one does launch and then there's a response and so on and so forth, there's still nothing good about that either. That's why the next factor comes into play here. Well, both the US and most importantly China, right from the very first time this blackmail appeared, from Putin's first statement about nuclear weapons, both publicly and privately told Putin, don't you dare, don't even think about it. Because the use of nuclear weapons on planet Earth is not in our interests, since then our house of cards would collapse. China, which is already facing huge internal problems, both economic and political, and those are closely connected, so the government is not as strong as he would like it to be either. There are also a number of countries around China that have their own interests, and if the Pandora's box of nuclear weapons is opened, they will say that then anything goes for everyone. In other words, this doctrine that there is a nuclear club and everyone else is out of luck. That's it. Enough. This is how it was. This is how it was done. These countries exist. No one else expands because we all agreed, and no one breaks the agreement. But if it's used even once, all these agreements go up in smoke, and as a result, China faces huge problems. She doesn't need this at all, but she is actually good at finding the right words for Putin so that he understands and gets the message quickly, you know? That's precisely why there are so many compelling stories and significant moments just like this one that directly contradict their official statements. Don't you agree? Plus, it's crucial to always remember, my dear friends, how this entire situation originally started over 3.5 long years ago, specifically during the initial full-scale invasion. At first, Germany said they were ready, yes, but only to give us helmets.
Because
it contradicted their entire military policy, their doctrine. They couldn't do anything. No weapons at all. How did it end? Well, with the fact that Germany became one of the biggest suppliers of the most lethal modern weapons for us. Thank you. And for that, a huge thank you. America, when they heard about Abrams tanks or other missiles, they would say, are you serious? Never in our lives. And every time Russia heard this, every time it was mentioned, they would say, we will use nuclear weapons if you give them that. If you do this, that's it for sure. But everything was given anyway, thank God, and they continue to provide it. And Russia just wipes it off because, I repeat, that's already the last step, which benefits no one, you see? So you have to fight with the means that actually exist on the ground right now. And the same thing, why am I going into such detail about this? Because the same applies to the Ukrainian sky. So what is stopping our Western allies from closing the sky? Look, we're not talking about them shooting down flying objects, whether drones or missiles, over Russian territory. They wouldn't even be entering its airspace. In other words, we're talking about them protecting us, a sovereign, independent country that has asked them for protection. So this has nothing to do with Russia, with escalation with Russia at all. They don't come into contact. They're destroying enemy objects that are headed toward peaceful Ukrainians simply to protect people. Do you understand? So what here contradicts anyone's common sense? Nothing at all. But this should have been done a long time ago. And only now, just now. But all this time it kept getting postponed and postponed. Like, we'll give you another Patriot instead, maybe something else. Well, you get the idea. And only now, when Russian drones are flying over Poland as if they own the place, when they enter Romania, that is NATO countries, this is just a test. All the experts say this is just a test. The first one, which NATO and Europe have failed, the US has failed it too. And that means Putin has been given carte blanche for new, terrible, horrifying actions. In other words, his appetite has only grown. So now it's not just talk anymore. Our Western partners are finally moving to action. And I think that at the very least, they will first close the Ukrainian airspace over Western Ukraine, that is the area close to them, because now it's about their own security. It's no longer some kind of virtual threat that they might have to defend against tomorrow by helping us today. No, now they're defending themselves right now. So look, we'll see how events unfold, but I think that in the near future, we will see that at the very least, and for this we are also very grateful, our Western allies will take responsibility for closing the airspace over Western Ukraine. They are specifically preparing for this, moreover. Right now, the Ukrainian experience is the most invaluable for them because what we already know, no other country or NATO army knows. And further on, I think everything will expand to the entire territory of Ukraine because this Iron Dome above us must be built.
No pass around, friends. Alesya Batsman, even when she's happy, works for you every week at the end of the week. Alesya, I'm very grateful to you, and as always, see you next week with a new batch of news and our incredible patriotic optimism.
Thank you, Dasha. Thank you, friends, and see you soon.